Hey everybody, and welcome back for such a special and surprising video. I had worked on one actually for some deck building tips, and we'll definitely get that out, but I feel like we just gotta get this video out first, right? We've got two brand new planeswalkers. I could go through the patch notes, but the patch notes are we've got two planeswalkers that are new, Garruk and Davriel, I believe. And we got the season reset, so people are back on the grind. But even before I'm going to touch that, I really just wanted to get a video out on what do you do when you've got a brand new Planeswalker, and I think both of them have kind of strange deck building requirements, or like just kind of like I feel like they're a little harder to tell exactly how they're going to play out. So I think today what we're going to do is just talk about some of the potential builds, and then maybe fire up a game or two with each and just see how it feels. So I'm going to start with Garruk, who I feel like is a little bit more straightforward. And I've got two kind of builds, but I think the one I would gravitate towards I call Big Scary Gary. Back in the day when I played with Garruk, when it first came out in Lorwyn, which he was one of the first planeswalkers that was printed. We just always used to say Scary Gary, and the fact that they made him black green is a throwback to his like reprinted one in Innistrad or wherever that was later, where he had a flip side. Yeah, so that must have been Innistrad, where he was like kind of the zombie Garruk. So I feel like that's where they wanted to go. So who is Garruk? What is he doing? What's his deal? He's got 27 life, so definitely a healthier life pool, kind of like Gideon, I think, is the same life. And I still don't quite understand how this works. I'm assuming you can only do it once per turn, because I think if you could just do it as many times, or I don't know, who knows? We're going to find out when we play a game. But activate. Give a friendly creature +1/-1. Okay. If a creature died this turn, give it +2/-1 instead. So immediately you think about trample, you think about evasion, right? What creatures might benefit, but overall your creature has to have enough toughness, right? Enough health to pump it, right? To pump up its power. So why might this be Garruk's, passive? We can look to our signature cards. So the first one, Cursebearer, awesome name. It's like a zombie bear, love it. It's a 2-mana 2/3 with trample. Okay, reasonable rate. At the end of your turn, if a creature died, this gets +1/+1. So, often like the floor could be you just run it out on turn 2, and then maybe you kill something or trade something off the following turn. It becomes a Watch Wolf, right, with trample 3/4. That seems fine. I'm not like excited, but I think it's like a reasonable body. The thing is, we always have to think about card evaluation in the context of other cards, right? And so when you've got Channeler of Might, which is a 1-mana 3/3, right, we need to be thinking about, is Cursebearer actually better as a 2-mana 2/3? So obviously the trade-off being that when you kill something, Cursebearer can scale up, right? Whereas Channeler of Might doesn't have trample, and it's only going to be a 3/3, but it's cheaper. So this is kind of what you want to be thinking about when you're like, is this card good? And right now I'm kind of like, it seems okay. Nothing to write home about, as they say, but, a decent one to start it off. So obviously, if you kill something, right, you can give your Cursebearer +1/-1, or +2/-1, right, making it a 4/2 Trampler, which is like, okay, you can build a bear into basically the iguana, right, which is a 4/2 Trampler. I don't know how good that is, but maybe if you're the more aggressive builds, maybe that's good. But I think it's totally fine to try. Wildspeaker's Fury, I think, is probably pretty good. So it's 3 mana, right? Destroy an enemy creature, and then you take damage equal to its power. If a creature died this turn, though, you take no damage. I would say with 27 life, you're pretty healthy. And so this makes me think about, okay, Path to Exile, right? 3 mana, destroy something, they get a mana gem. This just seems far better, right? Because taking damage is fine. Like, you can use that as a resource. When you give your opponent a mana gem, especially in the meta right now, which ramps and like can really get big quite quickly, or is aggressive and having extra mana would allow them to have more double spell turns. Fury is a good trade-off because taking damage is okay, right? You've got some of beefy creatures in green. You know, you've maybe got ways of even gaining life back, right? So that's not too bad. And if you've been able to trade off a creature ahead of time, right? Or, you know, something that fought something that turn, obviously you would just get to kill it for free, right? 3 mana, that's what it does. So I think Wildspeaker's Fury, when we think about Primeval Titan, Kothophed, I'm trying to think what are some other, I mean, it doesn't really do anything against Crush of Wurms, right? Because you can only kill one. But, you know, some of these kind of bigger threats, I would say, especially the Titans, this seems like a decent answer to those, right? I mean, taking 7 damage would be a lot, but it potentially is just still really, really good for you to be able to immediately answer that. So Wildspeaker's Fury, I'm kind of interested in. I feel like it's pretty decent. This card, it's hard to tell. And I am really excited to get in game and see. So Veil Cursed Predator, love the Innistrad art. It's so great. 5 mana, 5/4. Okay, fine. Debut, fight the enemy creature with the least power. If this creature survives, repeat. So it's by turn 5. I would say it's pretty reasonable for any opponent to have more than one creature on the board. So let's say we're playing against Teferi, right? And we play Veil Cursed Predator. They've got like a Krav on the board. They've maybe got their 2/4 on the board. So what happens, right? You play Veil Cursed Predator. You kill their 2/4, right? It deals 2 damage to you. You would deal 5 damage to it. And then if it survives, you repeat. So then you get to fight the Krav, right? And so you've paid 5 mana to play a 5/4 that has killed both of your opponent's creatures. And synergizes with what Garruk's doing, right? Because then you can activate your passive to give another creature +1 or +2 -1. So Predator does seem like it slots in really nicely to with what Garruk's trying to do, which is like you trade off some creatures or you use removal, and then you pump your creatures to attack in after you've removed some of their board. So it feels like Veil Cursed Predator should do some work. I mean, maybe there are certain creatures it would rumble with where that's not the case. But in my mind, I imagine this card's good. You know, I try to compare it to Daybreak Ranger, right? Which we'll just pop over to the deck list real quick. Where you're paying 4 mana, right? Ideally, you've got some mana gems to work with. You get a 4/3 Moonlight Reach Ward, and then it flips into a 5/4 and eats something. So often Daybreak Ranger ends up being a 2-for-1, right? Because you fight something for free, or you bite it, rather. That's the more correct Magic term, right? You're just dealing damage to the other enemy creature. It's not fighting you. And then you would trade this off for something, right? So that's 2 cards for 1. Sometimes you get even a little bit more mileage out of it. With the Wolf, or with the Predator, this is basically coming down and immediately trading for 2 creatures. It's hard to tell, like, how good that is. I imagine it is good, though. Like, if my Daybreak Ranger said, comes into play and I have the option to have it just deal 5 damage or fight 5 damage to 2 creatures immediately, in my head, that seems good. So, just trying to, you know, put this in the context of other cards in the set, I feel like it should be good. It should be a 2-for-1 most of the time. Worst case scenario, you're probably taking out a reasonably sized creature, and you're just paying 5 mana to do that. But I think it's pretty likely to get this to be kill 2 things, I get to pump one of my creatures with my Garruk passive. And that seems good enough to me. So those are Garruk's signature cards. Again, don't really understand how Predator's Instinct works. I imagine you can only do it once per turn. If you could do it as many times per turn, I feel like that would be pretty broken. But maybe that is the case. So, you know, we'll probably find out very soon. So I kind of just asked myself, okay, Garruk is black-green. What is green doing in the meta right now? It's ramping. It's doing some really broken stuff in a lot of ways. It's just super accelerating, right? Whether that's with Nissa and having access to Lava Wave, but also Primal Summoning builds, Craterhoof builds. And then when you compare Garruk to Vraska, right? Vraska just has a ton of card advantage, some really potent threats, some removal, some ramp herself, right? Some really good late game. And Garruk is kind of this interesting, like, different version of Vraska, right? Because he does want you to, like, trade off creatures or to, like, almost have payoffs for creatures dying, in a sense, right? And I did look at some of the finale creatures, but the reason Vraska's so good at that, right, is you're getting double the value on your finale creatures. I don't think we have finale creatures that just with one finale trigger are good enough. Like, that was kind of my first looking at the list and seeing if that made sense as a deck list. So I kind of just said, all right, I think let's just play a bunch of, like, good fight spells or fight cards or removal and try and develop a board early and then maybe ramp, as we do with most green decks, right, with Birds of Paradise. Always kind of doing a great job of that, and Primeval Titan, which is just the best Titan right now. And, we'll develop a board, and then maybe at some point we drop, like, a Predator, take out 2 of their creatures, and just, swing through and just overwhelm our opponents. So, and this particular late game package is a package that I thought about with Vraska often, and may be very good, which is just super high, like, trying to go really, really tall. Overrun, Craterhoof, Behemoth, Primal Summoning, Crush of Wurms. I don't know that this is correct, but I kind of just wanted to throw this together and see how it worked. So I just think Channeler of Might, when you're going big, it's just a really easy card to slot in your deck, and it's almost always going to be a 3/3. Great. Birds of Paradise, and you've got your early interaction package with Elvish Archer, which I've just liked more and more because of the stats. And now, what you can do, right, is you can go Elvish Archer, grudge match your guy. My Elvish Archer might be like a 3/3 or a 3/2. And then, honestly, I could even just Garruk it and make it into a 5/1 potential. Like, maybe you don't have a board and I just clock you for 5. Seems like it could be good, right? And then Cursebearer is kind of sitting there, maybe scaling up. Who knows? We'll see if it's good enough. Hermit of the Flock, I just think is like a pretty solid auto-include in every green aggro and mid-range deck. And one thing I thought about is like, oh, you can get a sheep and maybe you sacrifice the sheep, right? Or this is a 4/4, right? I can make it into a 5/3. I can make it maybe into a 6/2. Maybe with Overrun, that ends up being really good. It's hard to tell, right? And then you've got a lot of removal in the deck. So you've got the Wildspeaker's Furies, you've got Daybreak Ranger, you've got Veil Curse Predator. I feel like that's plenty, plus Grudge Match, right? To really, like, push your stat advantage if you can. Really capitalize on Garruk pumping creatures that might be, less consequential. Krav, it's a 4-mana 7/7, right? So if I go Hermit of the Flock, I could sacrifice my sheep to Krav, right? And then I can make Krav into a 9/6 when I play him. Now, you want to be careful, right? Because Lava Wave is in the meta, so I don't know that, like, shrinking some of your creatures is necessarily the best idea. But certainly, if you're in a spot to maybe, really punish your opponent, you can do a lot of damage with trample creatures. So I'm not running a ton of trample creatures because, again, I'm not super convinced that Garruk's passive is that powerful. But we've got Cursebearer that can scale up. We've got Krav. And we've got Kothophed, right, which you could slam it in as a 12/12, and then you can make it, even stronger, right, potentially. And it's got flying, so it's got a bit of evasion. So I thought that might be decent. Eladamri, the general, I think it's easier to say. I just think is very good in the sense of he's just a 4-mana 5/4, and the way I was kind of thinking about it is like Garruk would really like, maybe like cheap creatures that they can make into more relevant threats. So if you get your attack through with the general, even if it doesn't live, right, you're getting you're spotted a 2/2 elf, right, and then you can play that elf, and if general has died, you can then make that elf into a 3/1, right, or sorry, a 4/1. So, like, I don't know if that's that good, but in my mind, I was like, I think that's worth trying. And then, as I've said, I'm always going to have Daybreak Ranger in my green decks. Veil Curse Predator, I'm really interested to see. Kothophed survives through Lava Wave, or Flame Wave, Lava Wave. If you make it a 12/12, also it's just good card advantage. And then we've got Prime Time, as always, just going off, ramping us. And then we've got Overrun for like our extra stats, right, that we might have, which seems decent. Craterhoof, just one of the best things to be doing in a green deck. And then Primal Summoning and Crush of Wurms to really just go over the top of what maybe some of the other mid-range green decks are doing. And it's possible that we're just weaker, but I just felt like this was a good place to start. And I am going to run the Bayou, because I think with this sort of style where you're going really heavy on the late game, you definitely need to hit a land drop every single turn. And I don't think it's crucial that you're drawing cards with something like Woodland Hermitage in a build like this. I think you've got plenty of card advantage. Whether that's through Kothophed, whether that's through Primal Summoning, right? Like, by the time you get to Primal Summoning, you might be out of gas, and then you just refuel. And you're hitting all your land drops, right? And you're making the most of it. Plus, you've got Birds of Paradise and Primeval Titan, right, to really get to the late game and accelerate easily. So this is one build that I'm definitely going to try. I'm realizing this video is probably going to be long enough as it is, so I think we're just going to talk about the decks today, and then we'll hop in, this weekend probably, and try out some games. So this is Big Scary Gary. I don't want to move on too quickly without talking about an alternative kind of deck, and I did that for both Planeswalkers, just to show, like, where I'm kind of, like, starting, like, my 2 start points, and then maybe we'll get to an optimal build somewhere in there. So I obviously kind of thought, okay, I probably want to play Woodland Hermitage, right? I really love the card, and having a ramp package makes it pretty nice. But I was also kind of curious of, like, well, I haven't really thought about trying to play, like, black-green, like, more on the aggressive side, like, really using stat sticks like Detonator, right? 2 mana 4/4. But maybe that's the best way to play Garruk. It's hard to know. And in a deck where I keep the curve fairly low, Woodland Hermitage is just always going to be an all-star, drawing the extra cards. So in this build, I was kind of like, all right, let's look at some other potential lines of play and things that could be pretty good with Garruk. So again, no surprise here, right? Channeler of Might still makes it in because we've got Veil Curse Predator, we've got Krav, and I still think it's good enough, although we don't have that... of course. And then we have Recycled Grotesque. So I think we've got enough targets, right, for Channeler to still be a great one-drop. Birds of Paradise I still think is good, whether it gets sacrificed to Grotesque or Krav. I feel like that's a totally fine trade-off. And so here's where we definitely make a pretty strong deviation, right, which is, okay, I'm going to play some stat stick 2-drops and really leverage, just pounding away at my opponent, making my 4/4, I can make it into a 5/3, right, if I want to. Again, I don't really know if it makes sense to take some of your high toughness creatures, which are strong, and shrink them down at the at the benefit of giving them more power. I don't know if that's how Garruk needs to play the game, but I'm willing to give it a shot, and make use of the extra stats we've got. Obviously, Grudge Match makes it in. Pasture Prowler, in my mind, I'm like, okay, I play this, my opponent gets a sheep, right? I attack. It's kind of a free attack. They're almost always just going to block with the sheep, shrinking my Pasture Prowler down to a 3/3. Okay, cool. I've killed something this turn. I'm going to make this into, a 5/2 or something, right? And maybe that's good. Maybe we should be playing Barreling Hippo. Like, that's a card I'm thinking about. Maybe that is good, right? It's a 5 mana 5/5, gives all your creatures trample. The more I'm talking about it, the more I'm kind of interested in it. And you know what? Let's just make an adjustment real quick, because I'm looking at a card and I'm like, I don't know if this is it, Tim. Stormkirk Mentor, I kind of was like, oh, well, you can give something, evasion. It has evasion. You can put more stats on it, but I wonder if Barreling Hippo is just better. And also, it's more targets for Channeler of Might, which I think could be very good. And we're playing, like, high-stat creatures, so if we're thinking about, like, a Johnny almost, right, we want to take advantage of that. Stats on stats. I think that's what we should call it. Just save that real quick. we're just doing this live, baby. This is how you do deck building. You just kind of get in there and see what makes sense. Okay, let's continue. Bear, right? Bolt Club Shambler, my thinking was like, all right, it's a 2-mana 3/3. It's got a little bit of upside. Generally, I've liked this kind of in this like aggressive mid-range strategy. And again, it's like spotting us stats that we can use with Garruk's passive, so that just kind of was a no-brainer. Psycho Grotesque, right? Just huge stats, right? 6/6 for 3. We can sacrifice Channeler of Might after it's maybe traded with some or done some damage with something. Birds of Paradise. You know, at worst we could sacrifice the Shambler too, right? That seemed decent. And giving this trample, obviously, like early on, could be very backbreaking. You know, if we kill something right when we play Recycle Grotesque, we can pump it into an 8/5, right? Because we've sacrificed something on our board, something has died this turn, then we can use Garruk's passive. So, I don't know, 8/5 sounds kind of nice on turn 3. So we'll give that a shot and see how it goes. Now, Drana just kind of, I was looking through my collection, I was like, oh, this card makes sense, right? It's a flyer in colors that typically don't have that. So I just felt like that could be kind of nice. And what does she do, right? She attacks your opponent and becomes a 2/5, right? So you're just able to get higher and higher toughness, and you can just filter that toughness into your power with Garruk's passive. So I just thought that it kind of made sense to maybe give Drana a try. It's been quite a while since I played with that card. Hermit, again, makes it a sheep that we can sacrifice, right? It's like generally good stats. I just really like this card a lot in the green mid-range and other decks. It might not, who knows, it might be that I want to trade it in for another card. Spike Baloth, kind of a classic card for this game. You know, you could play it, you can make it into a 5/3 trample, right? Or maybe a 6/3 trample, right, if you've killed something. And maybe it hits really hard. I don't know. It could be bad. But I'm willing to give it a shot. We've got the same package, Wildspeaker's Fury, Krav Unredeemed, Daybreak Ranger, and then I did a quick switch. Instead of having the Stormkirk mentor, right, who just like has evasion himself, yes, you could make him into a 5/3 you know, sneak, right, with your passive, and then you give something else sneak. I feel like Barreling Hippo might just be better. It's already a 5/5 trampler, so at worst you can make it into a 6/4 trampler with your passive, and it gives everything else trample. And I think that's probably going to be better. Maybe you don't need 2, maybe you just need 1. I used to like it as a 1 of and a Johnny. And it feels like Garruk's kind of in this weird, kind of part Vraska, kind of part Ajani space, sort of. So I as I was talking about it, I think this card makes a bit more sense in the deck. And then Veil Cursed Predator, again, you know, one of the other cards at the top of your curve. I feel like if you're applying pressure early and doing it fairly well, and then you just drop a Cursed Predator and take out 2 of their creatures, like that just seems good. And then you just get to pump one of your creatures +2. So I don't know. I feel like this is interesting, right? And then you've got Woodland Hermitage, which you can start going off on turn 6, which is perfect, so it doesn't disrupt your curve. So these are the builds. I'm not sure if they're good, but I thought we would at least go over 2 for each Planeswalker for people to maybe have a little bit of an idea of like where I'm coming from with my deck building. So let's move on to Mr. Davriel, who has, I think, one of the funniest animations that I've seen. Like, this is just... and he just pulls up a chair and hangs out. Very strange. So, for those who hadn't seen the patch, right, what does Davriel do? There's a lot going on here, and my first impression is Davriel will be strong when we figure out to properly deck build with him. That's all. My other take as to why that might be is they already changed from the patch note to here one of the cards. So my guess is that it was a last minute like, oh, this is actually a little too strong. So I feel like he's maybe going to come in on the stronger side. We'll see. His deck building, I think, is really challenging. So let's take a look. 26 life, relatively high life total, which makes sense for a lot of what he's doing. So Shadow Siphon. Spells in your hand that include a color other than black, right? So obviously you know, a non-black color, but or like a dual black card, right? It's black, red, black, green, blah, blah, blah. Costs 1 less, and it has Pain Cast 2. So immediately you're like, oh wow, so playing spells in this deck is going to really, like, you're going to trade life, but you're going to be super, super mana efficient by doing it. Because when you make something cost 1 less, what does that mean? It comes down to turns sooner. Turn sooner than your opponent expects, a turn sooner than people are maybe used to playing with, which can be really, really impactful on like, basically everyone's kind of math when they're doing the game. They're like, all right, turn 4 they do this, turn 5 they do this. Davriel is going to really change that. And then, what is Demonic Contract, which is Davriel's deck building rules, which I'm so glad that they threw this out here, because I really feel like this is one of the best design spaces in the game. And so it says your deck can have a single copy of up to 10 spells of other colors. Now, before I move on, I want to acknowledge, I know many people are getting bullied by Nissa, who can run Lava Wave, right? Green Planeswalker gets to run a bunch of different, you know, 6 different color cards. My inkling is that Davriel will also be powerful because of that level of flexibility. I don't think it's going to be maybe as, like, challenging to play against as Nissa, because Nissa has access to, like, a huge ramp package, and that's what also really, I think, sends her over the top in a lot of ways. But I imagine this is going to be powerful, and I like it because it means there can be a lot of flexibility and a lot of tweaking. And I really like decks where you can get down to the nitty-gritty of the numbers and be like, I play with these cards, these 10 spells, these 10 different color spells, these are the best ones for what I've been seeing. I feel like that's really cool. But let's look at the signature cards. So, Paincast Demon. For me, this is the least impressive card. And that's because if you're going to build a way of offsetting your life, you know, the damage that you're taking, right, and keeping your life total high, I don't know that you should be building around this card. Like, there is Westfell Abbey. We're going to talk about a build that has that. And yes, a 1-mana 3/3 Trampler seems great. We also have a 1-mana 3/3 with no trample, but Channeler of Might, right? And there's no real setup to that, because most of your decks are running, you know, 30 to 40% 5 power and up creatures. So it's just like, basically, if you play this as a 3/3 Trampler for 3, it's bad. I would say it's actively not a good card. When you play it for 1 mana as a 3/3 Trampler, it's fine. I don't think it's crazy, right? But I do think that it's okay. So I would say this is the signature card that impresses me the least. The other two, I think, are a lot more impressive. Knight's Whisperer. Love the art. Love the card and Magic as well. Draw 2 spells from your deck, deal 2 damage to yourself. Just a really good trade-off, right? 2 damage is not a lot of damage to yourself, which, you know, the dream, right, is you're on turn 3, you got Knight's Whisperer, deal 2 damage to yourself, play Paincast Demon, right, for 1 mana. That's your turn 3. You've drawn 2 cards. You've played a 3/3 Trampler for 1. Really efficient turn. Knight's Whisperer is just really powerful. Being able to draw 2 spells out of your deck when you have cards that care about spells, and when you have particular spells that you have put in your deck to make your deck tuned to whatever your opponent's doing, it just gives you a higher likelihood of getting to those spells, and I feel like that's just really, really good. I mean, think about Divination, right? It's 3 mana to draw 2 random cards. This, you can even just know that, like, here are the 10 spells in my deck, or you probably have more spells than that, but, you know, like, you can kind of do the mental math on, like, this is how I'm going to increase my ability to draw these cards. So I think Knight's Whisperer is just, and it's 1 mana less, right? So it's kind of a strict upgrade from Divination. So I think that's a really good card. Okay, so Davriel's Scourge. Hard to tell how good this card is going to be, but I kind of immediately wanted to deck build around it because I felt like it was much more powerful than a 3/3 Trampler for 1. So what does Davriel's Scourge do? It says it's a 2/2 flyer for 3. After you play a spell, drain 1. Okay, I mean, Sorin's passive is pretty powerful when you're proccing it every turn. If you have multiple turns where you're draining your opponent and you're applying pressure, I imagine that's pretty good. So I feel like Scourge, although it's like not a super, you know, exciting creature on its own, I think you're already rewarded for playing at least 10 different color spells in your deck. And, potentially over the course of a game, depending on how your deck is built, you're going to be draining and draining your opponent. So I just think that this card definitely, it feels like it has more potential than the other card in terms of what you're building around, but we'll see. So that's Davriel. There's a lot going on here. And what does it mean when you deck build? So basically my thinking was I want to just play a cross-section of some of the best color spells that I possibly can, right? First one that comes to mind, Lava Wave, right? It's going to be here for a bit, folks, I think, until there's a patch. So being able to play one of Lava Wave, just very impactful. And I kind of immediately thought, all right, let's also play Day of Judgment. Why not, right? So we've got two really great sweepers in the deck. And so immediately I'm like, okay, I want to play something that's more control style, that's more spell heavy, and less of a Westville Abbey build. And I was thinking, I've been playing a bit more with Refreshment Stand when I was testing it in Nissa. I really eventually came off it because I didn't think it was good enough. This deck is interesting, right? Because, so you want to hit your land drops. And I didn't really want, a random zombie. I didn't want Hellmouth, right, where I'm pumping my, 5 creatures that are in this deck, obviously. But Refreshment Stand gives me access to, a random card, right? Often it's maybe a different multicolor card. And if it's a spell, right, I get a little bit of a bump. I get a little bit of a payoff. And then I'm just making sure that I'm hitting my land drops every turn, which I think you want to be doing if you're casting the spells that we have in our deck. So I don't know that Refreshment Stand is the best land for this deck, but I wanted to try it out. Pact of the Warlock. I don't know how good this card is. I don't see it often anymore, but in my head I was like, okay, you get a 1-drop. It's getting to siphon a little bit of life, right? And maybe that's relevant. And you get spotted Sign of Ill Omen, right? Which is a removal spell. It's a spell that's definitely relevant to have. And then even Whispers of the Grave, although it's not really powerful for what our deck's doing, it is another free spell. So if we count all the spells with our Davriel Scourge, right? I think there's 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10. Traps don't count. 11, 12, because Agony Warp spots you on. 13, 14, 15, 16, 17, 18, 19. So you can really maybe do some damage with this Scourge if they're not killing it. Break a Leg. So I wanted to think about what is my early game package. Black doesn't have great early game in a lot of senses. So Pact of the Warlock seems like it fills a decent slot with that. Break a Leg, I think I've always been impressed with, honestly. I think it's a little bit better than making a 2/2 zombie. You can sometimes nab people's debut triggers without them really accounting for it, so I think Break a Leg is just a nice, cheap interaction early on. Shock, same thing, right? I mean, this is one of my color spell slots. I do think that Shock is fine. I tested it in Nissa at times to make the aggro matchup better. I'm kind of down to play it, and I want to have, some stuff to do early while we're setting things up. Unsummon, I just felt can be a very, very good card, can be really relevant against certain matchups, so it kind of made sense as another cheap spell, color spell slot, because we get 10 of them with this deck. Obviously playing both Night's Whispers, and then Drain Blood, right, when you're taking damage from Night's Whisper or, some other source, right, it's nice to be able to siphon some life. I think Drain Blood is just kind of an auto-include for that. And then I've always really liked Extract Sample, whether it's just paying 2 mana to deal 2 and kill a creature, or, and I used to play it in RAL, I did end up cutting, I think, down to 1 at one point. But then sometimes you get to, nab one of their good creatures and then kill their creature off anyway. And sometimes it can really set up some crazy, crazy games for you. So I thought Extract Sample was good. Takedown, I think, is good, right? When we're living in a meta where we're probably going to still see some Jiraga Druids, right? The 3/4 in Nissa's deck, this answers it immediately, right? And you really need to answer that card very quickly. So Takedown just seems like a pretty no-brainer. We've got the Scourge. I felt like with a defensive build, Transparent Hallway is going to do a lot of work. Yes, it's telegraphed, right? If I pass the turn on 3, right, it's odds are, they're going to kind of know what this is. but I just think a 3/6 body does do quite a bit of work, especially into the aggressive decks. And if we're taking a little bit of damage here and there off of what Davriel's doing, right, in pain casting different spells, it makes sense to have some defenses to put down early. Pain cast Demon, I'm playing 1. In this sort of build, I don't think it's going to be that good. I do want to test it, like sometimes it's going to give me a very efficient turn. Who knows, maybe I'll like it more than I do. But, even when I'm pain casting spells and whatever else, I just don't think I'm really impressed by a 3/3 trample for 3 baseline, and I'm not that impressed with a 1-mana 3/3 trample. So, I'm trying one of it. We'll see. Agony Warp, I just felt like it was an auto-include because it is a nice piece of interaction where it's a 2-for-1, right? You take a creature, make it way less relevant, and then you take this and kill another creature with it. So it's 2 spells for Davriel Scourge, right? And that's kind of, I wanted to sort of have that as like the centerpiece of a bit of the strategy. Shell Game, just really good removal. Flagrant Foul, same thing. Lightning Helix, obviously healing 4, super, super relevant here, right? If you pain cast this on turn 3, right, because it costs 1 less, you get to deal 4 damage to something, and then you've dealt 2 damage to yourself from pain cast, and then you get to heal 4. So it's just, Lightning Helix I think will probably be an auto-include in almost all builds. So, Daggerclaw Lord. Haven't played with this card in quite a while. The reason I liked it is because we just have a lot of removal in this deck, and it's kind of a, like, build your own army sort of situation, right? Like, if it lives and you play it, even if, let's say, you're on turn 5, you slam at turn 6, your opponent plays a Primeval Titan, which is definitely not good for you, whether it's Flagrant Foul, right, or, let's see, what else would straight up kill it? I guess it's just Flagrant Foul, and maybe we'll put more Flagrant Fouls in the deck. But there are a lot of opportunities for Daggerclaw Lord just to make a free 3/1 for us, a free Daggerclaw Imp. It's got decent stats, so I just thought, okay, this might be a decent defensive creature for like a mid-range black deck, which is kind of what I feel like this deck is doing. Second Sun's Dawn just felt like an auto-include for a lot of reasons, right? I mean, if you're going later, like gaining 7 is really good for a deck that's like pain casting and taking damage. If you just run this out on turn 5, right, because you get that discount, you take 2 damage, but then you gain 7, so you're net gaining 5, and then you put Second Sun in your deck, which is like pretty potent card for your opponent to have to deal with in the late game. Kothophed, don't have to explain much. Card's really good. I just think you should probably have it in your black decks right now. I did want to try Wrong Turn, right? It got a buff in the 2 patches ago, so that it costs 2 mana if you miracle it, and we're already kind of like getting an incentive for playing spells in the deck, so it's just another unconditional removal spell. So this is another card that can obviously kill Primeval Titan, and some of the other like heavy hitters in the format right now. So it just felt like it made sense to try it. And then Grave Titan, I was like, if we're not going to play that many creatures in our deck, then we might as well have creatures that like at least gum up the board, right, and sort of jam up your opponent trying to attack your life total. So Grave Titan, I think, is a 6-mana 7/7 that spots you at 2/2 right when it comes into play. Is pretty good. I think it's fine for a mid-range black deck. And I think it'll probably do pretty well. And then, of course, you've got your sweepers and Day of Judgment and Lava Wave. And I basically was like, all right, do I want more early game or do I want more ways of closing out the game? And, the 2 non-zombie ways of closing out the game for, a late-game black deck would be Gristlebrand, right? 7/7 Flying Trample. And you have the upside of getting some pretty crazy card advantage if your life total is high enough. And then Ebon Death, right? I mean, Ebon Death I don't think is particularly that good, right? And like it kind of fell out of favor, especially with the Liliana Reanimator builds, because you just didn't want to have it, mess with your milling and stuff like that. But it is still like a hefty flyer that maybe nabs your opponent's best creature. You're trading resources, you're removing stuff, right? You've got a lot of unconditional removal. It's not, crazy to think that turn 7 you kill one of their better creatures, turn 8 you play Ebon Death and get it. So this is my first kind of crack at like what I would call like more of a control version, calling it Oops All Spells, because it is, as we counted, 17 spells in the deck. So yeah, I think there would be a lot of tweaking that needs to happen. but I thought it was like a good idea for if we want to try and build around Davriel's Scourge, which feels like kind of a nice little mini engine for a black control deck. So that's where we went with this. But I will say I have been able to talk with some of my teammates, my clanmates, and some people were talking about a few ideas in this deck, and honestly, it seems really fun. I'm really suspect of Westvale Abbey. I just have felt that when they nerfed their priest down to a 3/2, that was also not great for it, and I just feel like the card's really clunky, especially in a very aggressive meta. I don't really know that you want to be taking the damage, until you're really low. I never was really a huge fan of this card, but I think there are reasons why it's good, right? An obvious reason why it's good is it makes Paincast Demon guaranteed 1 mana 3/3 Trampler, and if you're playing more of an aggressive style deck, that could be really good. So obviously I wanted to think about, okay, if I wanted to make this more aggressive, and I'd had some teammates talk about like Dark Confidant, I was like, okay, Death Shadow probably also makes sense, right, as like your curve topper, something that could be really, really powerful. I don't have a second Death Shadow, so that's what that last slot would be. But yeah, so we still got Shock. I think that's good. Desperate Prayer is a really good early game way of gaining some life, right? Maybe you hit your Death Shadow, I guess, right? And you, it's to its cost, right? So you could gain a ton of life, I guess, from Death Shadow. I didn't even realize that sort of interaction until I started saying it. So that seems good, right? You offset a little bit of the damage that you're taking. Anticipate is just a really cheap way of searching what you need, right? And I think for a deck like this, you want to be very streamlined, and Anticipate's going to help with that. Night's Whisper, definitely there. Vengeful Brute, right? It's one of those more aggressive black cards. But yeah, you can play this, deal 2 damage to yourself, keep discounting your Death Shadows as you're going along. And then you can play your Paincast Demons for a lot less. And it's definitely an aggressive card. Still should be playing Drain Blood, right? Offsetting your life total loss. Your life loss is really good. Dark Confidant, right? It's a 3/2 for 2. You deal 2 damage to yourself and draw a card. Just seems like it really does fit with kind of the theme of the deck. Davriel Scourge, still if you're playing spells, right? It's going to offset that life loss as well. And then we've got 2 Flagrant Foul, right? For just like efficient removal. Mentor, I think, has always had this really amazing interaction, if you can get it, with Death Shadow, right? Where you play Mentor, you try and hope that you only have Death Shadow as the creature in your hand, you give your 13/13 sneak. And then that's a real problem for your opponent. But also, like, worst case scenario, you give it to your Scourge, your Paincast Demon, your Dark Confidant, which could be pretty decent, your Brute. You're still going to be pushing through damage pretty well. Again, Lightning Helix, just really good for dealing with X4s, which I think is a really relevant stat line right now. And Healing 4, again, you're offsetting some of that life loss. Change Teams, I just thought would be kind of cool. It's basically an unconditional removal spell where it takes, their best creature on the board, right, and it just puts it in your deck. And I tested it a little bit in Ashiok, and just in my mind, I was like, okay, this is just another way to answer some really big threat coming out of the ramp decks or the mid-range strategies. Don't know about Cage Match, folks. I'll be honest. I do like it because I feel like this card sometimes just really does a lot of work, right? It sometimes is exactly a 2-for-1. You just have their 2 biggest creatures fight each other, they kill each other, and that's a really good way of just continuing, the game through removing their threats. I don't know, the card might just be bad, but I just wanted to give it a shot. Second Sun's Dawn, I still want to play. Like, if we're going later in this game, we're dropping some threats, we're gaining some life, right? And there's a little bit more life gain, I think, in this deck than the other one, because we're playing Abbey. I still think Second Sun's Dawn makes sense. You can play it on turn 5, and gain 5 life, right? I feel like that is going to be good for you. Kothophed, still a really great option in this deck. Long turn, I still just felt like trying 1, paying 2 mana to destroy a creature and then maybe play another spell. That just does seem like it could be a really powerful turn. And then you end with Death Shadow, right? Which is just your ultimate curve topper, your way of like really, really closing out the game. And then, of course, all the while, right, you can get these priests, right, the demonic priest from Westvale Abbey, and be gaining some life back, right, and getting some card advantage. So, of the two builds, I feel like my first one maybe has a little bit more potential, just because I feel like it's a little bit more cohesive in what it's doing. But I've always wanted to have some sort of Death Shadow, like Westvale Abbey deck kind of work, and it sort of feels like maybe with Davriel that's possible. Um, so I think I'm going to wrap it there, folks. I'm sure it's already been long enough. Um, I definitely wanted to just get this out so that folks, can get, just get their keys, open up those planeswalkers, and just have a little bit of a roadmap of like, okay, what are some cards to try? There's so much you can do, especially with Davriel. There's just access to 10 different colored spell slots in your black deck. Tons and tons of things that you could be doing. And then for Garruk, I think it's going to be this interesting mixture of like, do you go kind of aggressive and you're trying to use your stats like to kind of outmuscle your opponent? Do you go more over the top and you just have some really great kind of scaling threats and you've got a really great brand new removal spell on a brand new creature that can be a 2-for-1? Who knows? But I think we'll close out there for today. And again, thank you everyone for the love to the channel. Definitely keep liking. Please comment. I want to hear your builds. I want to hear how things are going as we enter this weekend. I'm sure tons of people are going to be busting open those new planeswalkers and seeing what works and what doesn't. And feel free to join the Discord as always in our link. We've got a tournament going on this weekend. So when this goes up, you'll still probably have a full day to sign up. And the big news is first place is going to get a foil mythic through Wizards of the Coast, and second place is going to get a foil epic. And then also our Discord is going to be doing a bit of a giveaway for first place as well. So there's a lot there. Please just hop in the Discord. You'll find out all the details there. I don't want to bore you too much, and this video has probably already been too long. So thank you so much, folks, as always, and I will catch you very soon. Take care.